for the Cord Tst call. Where are we? June 12th?
Right. Yep.
All right. We have a couple of topics. Revisit SIBA and the relationship to Cord, and in particular Cord. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. But I wanted to start with just a status on the 6.0 release. Let me, Mateo, can I, you've got the presentation. How do I get that away from you?
You should be able to present now.
Got it. Thanks. Okay. We're close, but not quite there. Let's do a quick run through the blockers.
If you hit not done at the top, it'll filter out all the done ones.
Oh, thank you. Okay, this, of course, the folks working on this understand that this is for everybody else's benefit, so we get a sense of how close we are. 3117, Zach?
Yeah, so previously our releases were tagging every repository in our source code with the release tag. We're going to change that so that it tags specific repositories and we can version them independently. This is partially, this is a big progression from our previous method of doing releases. And we have to do this anyway because our Jenkins infrastructure got replaced in this release cycle. So that's in progress. And it should let us do independent versioning of components like services and XOS core and those sorts of things moving forward. So that's in the process.
Are those is each independently versioned entity going to be its own repo?
Yeah. So for example, let's say you had the Kubernetes synchronizer or the VTN synchronizer or something like that. Those would have their own version. XOS would have its own versioning. The things that would be tagged with the full platform release would be the tools repository and the Helm charts repository, which aggregate other things based on their released versions.
Okay, so from a distance to release point of view, this is a month of work, a day of work.
This is probably
remaining.
This is probably half a week, and then we have to go through and apply versions to things, and that might be
okay. So this could be this is the pole in the tent right now.
My feeling is that it's that, and the other thing that's holding us back is some of the QA work. They got their OLTs and other stuff just recently, so they've had to get those set up, and they're in the process of getting us a good testing infrastructure so we can actually so they can actually validate our release.
So everything on this release blocker is pre-QA. I mean, they're working obviously in parallel, but
right.
QA follows all of this.
And not, or they can. Some of it can happen in parallel.
Sure,
a lot of it is figuring out jobs and stuff, other stuff. And my feeling is that Suchitra has a pretty good grasp of those sorts of things.
Okay, so we'll come back to that. So 3012, Scott.
Yeah, 3012 is a bug where various components, Chameleon is one of them, Tosca Engine is another, and all of the synchronizers as well. Various components will occasionally hang while trying to contact the core. The difficulty with this bug is it's only reproducible reliably at the ONF pod. I don't think we've been able to reproduce it locally on a laptop or remotely on Cloud Lab yet. Or maybe we just haven't tried hard enough to reproduce it in those contexts. I'm going to fire up some Cloud Labs and see if it'll happen there today.
So I think Suchitra saw the same bug on QAPod.
Yeah. So Scott, so this what we saw is even we have like Cloud Labs or a single node, we are not able to see this, but I'm able to reproduce on 2 of the pods because yesterday also I set up a new pod and able to see this bug. So, and right now I'm using the workaround to run it. by restarting the chameleon. So at least there is a workaround.
Yeah, what is your workaround?
After I restart chameleon, then it and wait for a couple seconds, and then it works fine.
Yeah, so one issue is that Chameleon is just one of the places where this can happen. It can also happen in Tosca engine or synchronizers. So it may be that you're mostly seeing it in Chameleon because you're mostly doing API tests. Is that true?
Yes, right now, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, people who are setting up real production pods may see it more often popping up in the other components, which is kind of what I was seeing happening on the ONF pod. You know, lots of times Chameleon would come up fine, but either the Tosca loader would get stuck in an infinite loop because the Tosca engine was down, or because some synchronizer had never registered its models. So it seems to happen in all of those contexts. It'd be nice if we could figure out why it's only happening on these pods and why it's not happening on Cloud Lab. I mean, is it a mini cube thing versus cube spray? What is, you know, we should take this offline, but try to quantify whatever is the difference in these configurations, and maybe that will give us some insight.
Yeah, sure, Scott. I'll talk to you offline.
Okay, thanks, Scott. 3037, unassigned, really big number.
So that's work that needed to be done to move to fill out the automation tools repository, which we're using as the to build and publish some of the artifacts. That's part of the way done. The two items that you'll see that aren't totally done are it's multi-part. The two items that aren't done are I think it's further down. To have the Cord light have a test that goes through and pings, so that's the QA task, and then beyond that, there's also one for OpenStack Helm and Cord.
Yeah, 3071, which is down in the backlog, but I just moved it up to the sprint.
So that we can validate both of our Cord and Cord service chains and have a working test for those. So that's part of the way done. There's also a thing for a network script that I have almost done that should be done in the next day or so. So that testing, I think we're on. It's an Andy and Suchitra issue of how long do they think that's going to take. Do you have an idea for the OpenStack Helm and Cord stuff, Andy?
Well, we have a server set up at Flex for this, and so I think it's just a matter of creating the Jenkins job to do it. I'm not familiar with the new JJB, but I know somebody who is. So
yes, I will help you, Andy.
Yeah.
It's easier than it looks once you've done it once.
So I don't expect that'll take that long.
End of the week for the whole thing? That's ambitious.
I think so. The problem is getting it debugged and tested. So
yeah, I think end of the week is a reasonable target.
All right. Mateo 3022.
Yeah, so as now we are exposing in the Helm charts part of the configuration of the synchronizer that the operators shouldn't be exposed to, as they mainly don't have any way to configure them. It's really a developer-specific configuration that is hopefully going to be removed anyway in 7.0. So we want to hide that from the operators, and that is in progress. I have a first patch I need to upgrade the services, but it should be done this week.
Okay, thanks.
The most important thing here is that we get the feature in the core, and then we can update the service in a second time if we are in a hurry to do the release.
Okay. I lost track of the subtasks. 3133 isn't one of them, is it?
No.
No, this is different. All right.
Right. So this is right now the OpenStack Helm install is just working off the head of master, which is, it does get nightly testing and it usually works, and so most of the time this works out, but occasionally it's been broken or unstable. So I think we just want to, until OpenStack Helm has an official release, I guess we just want to pick a specific commit that works and pin to that.
Got it. Got it. All right, 3142.
So this, so we discovered that the XOS database isn't persistent. So for instance, if the node, we noticed this on mcord for the first time, if the mcord node reboots, then all of the XOS database state disappears and you have to reinstall it. I think we agreed that we don't need a really fancy solution here involving NSF or NFS or SAF or anything like that for persistent volumes. We just need to have something so that you can reboot the node and the XOS database will still be there. Yeah, I think that looks like it's unassigned right now. I think maybe Gopi said he would take that on.
Yeah. So this is a little bit of a rabbit hole. There are a couple of solutions. We can take our existing implementation and try and see if there is a local mount that can be used to persist. I'm a little skeptical about that route. I do think that having an independent mount like an NFS is the solution, but we decided to postpone that discussion to the next release. So for now, I will either look for a local persistent mount that and we install the DB only on a single node by assigning affinity to that node, or we use an out-of-the-box Helm chart that we found with a few other options that automatically manages persistence. Now I'll have to see how they do the persistence, but that is the these are the two options. A little bit of complication here is that I'm away tomorrow and Thursday at the conference. So if this needs to be done yesterday, then that might be a problem. I'll look at this today on priority, but I'm not sure if we can have a robust solution by the end of the day today.
All right, thanks, Gopi. 3071.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we already talked about
That's the one
now.
we already talked about. Got it. And 3144.
Yeah, so I've been testing Volta and OpenOLT the last couple of days, and there's a couple of issues that I found. One is a minor CLI issue, which was due to a patch version the last couple of days. That should be easy to fix and should be fixed soon. But the other one is I see sometimes some instability in the OpenOLT driver. It looks like sometimes Volta can hang in some situations, and so I don't know, I don't have a super good idea of what's going on there, or how to reproduce it even, but I have seen some instability in the testing that I've done. So it seems to me we need to do some more testing before we can really be confident that we have a Volta and an OpenOLT driver that work together on the OLT.
Yeah, thank you.
And then the other problem with this is that I'm going to be out the next 4 days, so I personally won't be able to make progress on that. But I'm hoping that we can get others to test the OpenOLT driver in Volta on the Cord part of ONF, and try and either like confirm the issue or make sure that the issue is not there in the meantime.
Okay, thank you. Scott, I think I heard that you had some capacity, so it sounds like there's plenty of opportunity here, which I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not intending to do right now. I'm just making that observation.
One thing we don't have listed in these items, I think we do have some documentation issues that we should try to get done for the release. So Mateo and I are both working on tutorials And there's some other things like just clarifying which example services work with which profiles and stuff like that. Perhaps we just didn't mark those as blockers, and that's why they're not appearing in the list.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're probably right about that. All right, so
sorry, there is also a feature that we discussed that we wanted to have in that I don't see a Jira for it. That is to configure the fabric not to automatically discover hosts. I don't know if we want to track this or not.
Yeah, that's correct. It should also be a blocker, and I have someone assigned to look into that while Jonna is away, and hopefully by the time Jonna comes back, we should be able to test it end to end. So I can create a story and assign a blocker on that.
I'm creating it, sort of, no problem.
That's
and I discussed yesterday with Charles and Andrea. I can help them test the feature once they have it.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. So yes, Andreas actually has been assigned to do that. One other issue is that while it's not a blocker for 6.0, it can actually come after 6.0. Is that Cord in a box or has to incorporate somehow Volta with probably Ponsim together attached to Mininet that will emulate the aggregation switches through end-to-end data plane. I think
there are a bunch of things that need to be done to support that, right? One is that Ponsum needs the NNI port to be added, which is being worked on right now. And then the other is the issue with the Q&Q, the subscriber termination in Mininet or NOVS.
Yeah, I think the latter issue, I think we fixed that. John Wan, before he left, did implement. I think it's in review right now. Hopefully be merged at some point. But we have been able to do the Q&Q termination in OVS. It's actually not so much about Q&Q. It's more about using some features that are in hardware and to be able to replicate that in a software switch. But I think we have passed that issue. As soon as the NNI ports are available on Ponsim, we should be able to do an end-to-end. Should be able to hook that up into Mininet. But yeah, it's not a blocker issue, but it is something that we should be able to provide to the community. Important for SIBA, it's important for Cord as well, to be able to bring up SIBA or our Cord without actually any OLT hardware.
it is important.
Agreed.
All right, so super ambitiously the end of the week, but I think we all recognize that's ambitious. So, teacher, what?
No, it's not going to be end of the week because, like I said, there is this additional blocker issue about the fabric. So that's not going to be done by the end of the week.
Okay, so we have at least one. I mean, that was already terribly ambitious, just given everything else. But so, teacher, do you have a sense of? I mean, obviously your work's going on in parallel, but what is your sense of where we are?
Yeah, in terms of QA, yeah, we still, I was just able to set up the OLT and ONU, and we have got some of the equipment late. And yesterday I was able to set up the pod and also install, but I'm running into some issues. So given that, there are still the data plane tests that needs to be validated. And in 6.0, what QA has planned is we will be doing only manual and basic scenarios for these tests. So definitely we need one more week for these tests. And also another thing that we have is the MCORD end-to-end service chain test that we need to get added, because since 4.1 for MCORD release, nobody has really worked on MCORD, and even the community was also at 4.1. So 6.0, there were a couple of tests that were still pending to be realigned, and at a minimum, Andy and myself, we talked about it, and then we thought that we should just get this test going, and that needs some time. And at the same time, we are also validating the documentation part and trying to go through this and then validating the procedures. So given that we definitely need minimum of a week, but I was mentioning yesterday in the stand-up that it is 10 days.
Okay, thank you. So at the moment, we're 3 days out from the official release, but adding a week to that is 10 days. I mean, I think that's probably our working assumption right now, although even that is going to be tight, but I think that's where we're at. All right, thanks everybody. But I just wanted everyone to have a sense of where we are. Changing gears a little bit to SIBA. First of all, we got a couple of things here, which is there's some procedural things, and this is the proposal slide I had up last week, but I've made a couple of edits to it. And we specifically want to talk about the relationship to ACORD. But I know there are questions out there about just generally SIBA, Cord, exemplar platforms, reference designs. It's a confusing space. So I thought I would just spend a minute or two there, and I don't have it written down, but just say a couple things, and then if there's questions, we can talk about those. But I want to get on to the ACORD relationship here pretty quickly. So as everyone understands, there are reference designs coming. There technically is, I believe, a very early first draft or 0.1 draft of a SIBA reference design. But what's happening is that there is also a SIBA exemplar platform happening in parallel. It's not as though the reference design, which is generic, is way out in front of the exemplar platform, which is specific. They will, in fact, inform each other, and to some extent, what we're talking about here is primarily SIBA, the exemplar platform, because we're very much focused on the implementation. The reference design work is happening in another group that meets periodically, and they'll be producing documentation on that. That won't always, I don't know that exemplar platforms are going to always be out in front of the reference designs, probably not, but it isn't that surprising that they're kind of iterating between the two, because the exemplar platform informs the reference design and vice versa. But everything we've been talking about here is really focused on the exemplar platform more so than the reference design, because this is more focused on the open source implementation choices we're making. Are there questions about that general model before we go on? You can try to answer. Okay. So the slide you're seeing, again, is a slightly edited version of what I had up last week. And what we're focused on here is the relationship between SIBA and Cord. So Cord, I would characterize it as SIBA and MCORD are two, and you could add ECORD to this as well. It's kind of lost its urgency, but there will be other configurations. One can view them as use cases or specific configurations of Cord. But from purely a Cord point of view, because SIBA is so high priority, it doesn't really make sense to do Cord release planning until after we've made a bunch of progress on SIBA. Now, whether we try to stick to the 7.0 official release time of mid-October or that will slip because we really want to incorporate more SIBA, we'll have to make that determination later. But the high-level point is what goes into the next Cord release will be so influenced by work that gets done for SIBA, it doesn't really make any sense to separately plan a Cord release until that's more informed. That doesn't mean that the Cord TST has nothing to do until then. It's still a general platform, supports a range of access technologies. It is an architecture in support of what for ONF and the partners is important, which is multi-access edge cloud. And so we will continue to pursue that with the understanding that a lot of the engineering work is going to be happening on the SIBA side. There's not zero engineering on MCORD, but it'll be lesser probably. We need, now this is moving beyond Cord. We need a SIBA implementation call. There is a SIBA reference design call that's happening, but I think we also need an implementation that's pushing the oversight, and that can be at multiple levels. It could be at a feature level. It could be at a Scrum level. So maybe it's more than one, in fact. Let me make that edit. And those have not yet been scheduled, but we're trying to align, get all the right people lined up with Scrum Masters and so on, and product owners to help make that happen. As far as the Cord Tst, we will continue to have calls. They may not be as frequent. We will, it just depends on what Cord needs to consider that's apart from anything that's going on with SIBA. I guess we'll just have to play that one by ear.
It seems to me we need to convene the Cord Tst calls when, as part of SIBA, there's a technical decision being made around Cord. I mean, shouldn't at that point the TST would be involved in, is this the right direction for Cord? Yeah.
Yeah,
that's
a good point.
Because we're probably a huge overlap between who's on the Cord TST and who's in SIBA, but.
Yeah, good, David. Very good point. And there will be similarly. There very well could still be those kinds of feature discussions that come out of MCORD as well. But you're right that there will be situations like that will be. And I'm just the way this I think is just going to play out is that let's assume the Cord TST calls happens unless they get canceled because there just wasn't enough of an agenda to make it worth everyone's time. So the third bullet here is there is already a SIBA project board in JIRA. And in fact, there are people starting to add stories to it. This does not preclude that there could also be work under VOLFA and Cord, two very related projects. How individual stories find their way into the Cord, VOLFA, or SIBA board is, we're just going to have to play it by ear. I think we need to keep SIBA front and center, and so
So if there's a SIBA story that actually turns out to be Cord work, and I don't know how we're going to differentiate that, are we talking about replicating stories from SIBA to Cord, or doing Cord work under the SIBA board?
I think it's more the latter, and it's one of those juggling things that mostly for the sake of making sure that we keep our eye on the SIBA ball, that it would be under the SIBA board.
Okay, but then I think we need to be very careful part of the SIBA JIRA, when we talk about component, being able to identify the component, whether that's a Cord component, whatever, so that we have some way to do analysis, where the work's being put, I guess.
So David, one thing that you may or may not be aware of, and this is just a very practical point, which is that a lot of the engineers at ONF who have been focused on Cord will be putting their focus on SIBA. And so, if they're waking up in the morning and putting their SIBA hat on, even though the work in another time and place would have been classified as Cord, that would be the gravitational pull to put it on SIBA.
Understood. The question is, in the JIRA itself, on the SIBA board, are we going to create components so we can differentiate
the very good
board, or are we going to just completely blur the line, I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that there would also be component factoring of the SIBA board. That makes sense. Okay. All right. That's enough of that. If there aren't any other questions, I wanted to go to the more narrow issue of the relationship between the FCAPS work that's happening and ACORD. And I guess I had a slide in this deck that addressed that a little bit. basically, and Jim, please jump in whenever you have questions here, and we can turn this just into a general discussion. But there is um, a general consensus among a number of parties involved in SIBA that for starters, we're going to just start throwing stuff onto the Kafka bus. And we need to come up with a schema. And I guess I could augment this by saying that Vez is a very popular choice. You'll see Vez comes up here twice. So either the internal schema is based on Vez, or we come up with an independent internal schema for SIBA, and then we write a transformer to export it as Vez in the case where it's being consumed by specifically by ONAP, which wants to see Vez events.
So there's a proposal within the Volta, because Volta has the same kind of concept, right? Put the data on a Kafka bus.
Yeah,
I think it's coming out of AT&T.
Yeah. This is all a convergence of all those different efforts here. Yeah.
We just want to make sure that we're in line. I don't want to see Volta use one format necessarily, and Cord.
Absolutely. So just an FYI on where some of this engineering work is starting. The AT&T foundry in Atlanta is stepping up here and starting to do some work, so that I haven't looked recently at JIRA, but I believe the stories you will find there probably came from Don and his crew there. But yeah, the challenge we face right now is making sure that the Cord, Volta work all starts to align under the banner of SIBA and going forward.
That's right. So Larry, it's Jim. So Larry, what we've been doing is kind of starting, I guess, from a bottoms up approach let's call it in the absence of an architectural agreement. So as you say, it's a matter of I'd say right now we're at the point of making sure that we've identified all the minimum viable data points that AT&T's identified in pretty good detail. That's Tom Moore and that group of folks.
So Tom Moore is involved in that. That's great.
Yeah. Tom Moore, and he's been entering JIRA stories. There's around about 38 of them, I think, as of this morning, altogether. Although most are unassigned and unassessed. So really, I think what Mariner's planning on doing, and I wanted to get alignment here, is we're going to take the approach of understanding that there's some uncertainty around where NEM and SIBA will land in the coming weeks. In the meantime, we want to continue to make hay by making sure that we identify where those sources are, what the behavior of those sources would be, and effectively then hopefully we can land on with this team's help, what that common event format should look like. I think Vez would be fine by our standpoint. I think we just need to probably all sort of agree that that's the approach we'll take, and then Mariner can focus on how do we actually expose those data elements, a lot of managed entities, that sort of thing, from the Volta architecture in a Vez compliant format. So I think we can do that largely independent of figuring out where what role NEM plays versus OSAM. I haven't even heard awesome really in this discussion yet, but I hear that quite often in these discussions, and seems to be some uncertainty perhaps still around what belongs in NEM versus at a higher level like OSAM. So I think our strategy is a little bit more tactical than that. So we've just said, let's make sure that we identify the data sources, that we understand their behavior, how to get them, what the status of those is, so we can report back to the team, estimate the work to get it on a queue in a standardized format. What's done with it at that point, I think it gives us a bit of runway as a team to figure out where the proper place is for that to get, let's say, mediated. Yeah,
that's exactly the right approach.
And just to put forth again, in terms of FCAPS, there are Nagios, OpenNMS, Xenos. when we talk about NEM in the SIBA context, I would like to explore. Let's not build FCAPS if we can just leverage another open source project.
So David,
and that may have some influence how we do eventing as well.
yeah. So postponing that and just starting with as Jim described, tactically getting the data on the bus that's great. The consideration at that end of the spectrum is one of the things that, and again, I'm applying a lesson from Cord to SIBA here, so it may or may not apply, but we've started to be less prescriptive in Cord about how technology gets absorbed and adopted in an operator, and so capping off something like the FCAPS work in SIBA with something as comprehensive and monolithic as Nagios, which is likely not going to be the system of choice for most carriers. We were looking for something with a lighter touch. But I think
that's fine. My point is not Nagios specific or ONMS specific or Xenos specific. I think we show an example how you can integrate with an FCAP system and let the carrier provide whatever FCAP system they already have. So we publish the data like we're talking here, which is absolutely right in my opinion. And then what it gets published to or how it integrates with an existing FCAP system is much like Kubernetes, right? Install your FCAP system. Here's an example of integrating, and we can show that example with multiple open source NMS applications. I'm suggesting we use one of those as an example and show that integration, not create a new lightweight one to show an integration.
Yeah, I think we agree. I think it would be a matter of Well, so this now gets back to what value add does NIM provide, and from an FCAPS point of view, my perspective, and this is still to work out, is that it's giving us a single, so that we don't have a team of them, to enforce access control and optionally a control interface on these things that are delivering all the data. And beyond that, it's not attempting to be a dashboard. It's not attempting to be an analytics. It's attempting to be one-stop shop.
I just think we have to be careful, and I think part of it is we need to kind of break apart NEM a little bit into its disaggregated components, and then see where we can leverage or show examples of how you can use existing open source projects to solve that disaggregated component of it, versus we really have to build something, right? I think a lot of bits of NEM are going to exist in the various carriers as deployed systems. And so we want to show examples of integration with deployed systems or that. And we just want to be careful about what we say. This is NEM, right? NEM is a collection of services.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I don't disagree with anything you said. And in fact, that does come back to the original point of OSSOM, which is trying to define it. I mean, the acronym is Open Source Access Manager. And now they have other issues to deal with, like in particular, it's designed to work with ONAP, and SIBA is supposed to work with multiple northbound things. And then there's also the issue: is if it purely local for one central office, or is it aggregated across a set of them? So there's some other, OSSOM has some other considerations, but.
So making these collectors generic in the sense that one could be Nagios and one could be Elasticstack and one could be whatever Xen or whatever other aggregation tool we want to use, and then providing examples. That seems totally in line with the goals.
Yeah.
So I think Larry said it right, that we don't have a disagreement here. It's just deciding which of these things to implement, and we could definitely use input on that as an example.
Okay, but I guess it's like, I don't think we're building a collector. I think we're just publishing data, and then we use existing collectors.
Right.
Is kind of where I'm going. All right. It's probably language in deep, how I'm trying to explain it, and a whiteboard might help.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think we're probably pretty close. It's just English is a pain.
Yep. And back to Jim's point, let's not delay while we sort this out. That if we have I mean, I think we all agree that it really comes down to getting the schema defined so we can start, and on Kafka the right topics, and pushing forward with that as fast as we possibly can. Jim, it seems you've come to your own clarity on this, so that's great. Is there any other Cord, well, as much clarity as you can, given how muddied the future looks for us right now?
Yeah, no, things are a lot crisper, and I've been holding off, just reaching out to the various Volta participants until we've had this discussion. So I feel pretty good at this point. I had reached out to Chip rather, but haven't spoken to him live. I think a lot of the FCAP sources are going to be related to his work, and again, I'll be able to make some progress here. I would agree that I think some of the separate discussion that you and I have had through email in the past week is that the Cord meeting right now probably should, in fact, just get, I guess, get canceled or postponed, and in lieu of that, just we'll focus around the Volta and SIBA use cases, which I think is a more effective use of time. And as you say, Cord really was trying to be probably too prescriptive for something that wasn't prescriptive enough or didn't need it. So
yeah, okay. I think I think I agree with that. That, I mean, I called out the need for SIBA implementation meetings. It very well could be, well, again, we got to get the right product owner in place, Scrum Master and all of that, but then there'll be a combination of Scrum of Scrums, feature design, subgroups going off and working on the fault topic, and another subgroup going off and working on the metric topic or performance topic / metric topic, or whatever that turns out.
Right, and at this point, we're focusing our attention on the Volta calls and making sure that we're capturing those. And again, I'll start at the bottom up. I guess the only question really in my head right now is, have we arrived at a conclusion on this call as to are we going to turn the Cord TST call moving forward into a SIBA focused call, which has got a Volta flavor to it, or are we going to keep separate calls?
We're going to keep. Yeah, so that back to this, just to be clear on this one, we do still need to convene, I'm going to say weekly, but there could, again, it's possibly multiple levels of calls here. And those, I would say that Cord probably gets subsumed there for now, but Cord, we will continue as necessary to have our TST calls, because it's got other things to consider that are beyond SIBA.
Got it.
All right. Hopefully, this is every time we do this, we get just a little bit more clarity on all of this. Is there anything else? Okay, let's call it a day, and thanks everybody. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.